Bouncers of Reddit. Have you ever crossed paths with someone you've had to throw out of a club or bar? How was the experience? Haven't been a bouncer in about 15 years, but funny story from when I was. A guy threw out and had to manhandle roughly came back the next day, not to start trouble or get in again, but merely to apologize and go. Seeing somebody genuinely sorry was a very rare experience. He said and I quote, "I know I was a bit of a cunt and needed a slap, I know I'm banned, I was off my nut and just wanted to say sorry and no hard feelings." It stuck with me because he really meant it. It really doesn't go like that most of the time. I was interviewed by a guy we had tossed out. I still remember his name because he was such a douchebag that we banned him after this interaction, and we all kind of laughed at his name because it fit his behavior so well. Think Kyle Blake, not his real name, but he has two kind of bro names as first and last. Anyway, fast forward about a year having finished school, and I'm at a staffing agency to interview for some crappy job. In walks Mr. Blake. Unfortunately, nothing super interesting happened, but throughout the interview he acted a little strange. I never found out if he recognized me, but I was not offered the job. I've bounced off and on for about 15 years in the same mid-sized city. One night, as people were leaving, this guy sucker punched another patron right inside the door. Several other people quickly got involved. I grabbed Mr. Sucker Punch and he spins around and squares up with me. I guess because I'm tall people always seem to try and rush me and wrestle me by the waist. Mr. Sucker Punch was no different. We end up wrestling for a second before I finally get a solid grip on him. He's still trying to fight at this point. I ended up picking him up and throwing him through the exit doors, breaking one of them off the hinges. About a week later I'm out to eat with my mom of all people and in walks Mr. Sucker Punch and sits down 2 tables over. I wasn't particularly worried about it, but I really didn't want to have to beat someone up in front of my mom. About 5 minutes later I see him talking to the waitress and she makes her way over to our table. "That guy over there said you threw him through a door the other night at the bar. He wanted me to tell you he's sorry for being a dumb drunk." Not a bouncer, but a former bartender. I had to call the cops on a couple who had become angry and violent during a Sunday brunch. Both were arrested. The husband threw a glass at me, but the wife started swinging at the cop, so she got the worst of it. Rumor has it the husband was released later that day, but the wife spent a few days in jail. A few weeks later, I was in Walmart and spotted the couple. The wife didn't see me, but the husband did. We both walked away in opposite directions without saying a word, but truth be told, I was terrified. It happened fairly frequently with the regulars. As long as they weren't fighting, they'd be allowed back in the next night. Usually they were pretty embarrassed and apologized for being a drunken jackass. One time I did have to kick out a good friend because he got in a fight. He was in a bad place and was pretty embarrassed by the whole thing. We didn't really talk about it much afterwards. That was over a decade ago and we're still friends today and he's settled down and doesn't drink like he used to. Not a bouncer but an ex-manager. Had one guy come back sober and apologized for his behavior and actually thanked me for throwing him out. Apparently it was a wake-up call for him, not the first time he'd been an aggressive drunk. I didn't see him again after that, so not sure if he actually changed though. I used to bounce at a club in Annapolis, if you can call throwing drunk spoiled little rich idiots out of the bar bouncing. 3 guys I had thrown out a few weeks prior saw me in a Shoppers grocery store. They started following me, first talking shit and then throwing food at me. I left my cart, walked through the 3 of them, and told them to meet me outside. They called the police, and when the police showed up the manager lady nicely and happily explained to the police what they had done, and they were arrested for throwing store items. Never saw them again. I remember one called himself Big Country, a fat sloppy idiot thrown out of the Navy for being a fucking moron.